I dropped an underwater camera 1,000 feet deep in the ocean, and what we saw down there was unbelievable. So without further ado, let's get right into this video. We started our morning making a 7-mile run out of Hillsborough Inlet to get to our spot in 1,000 feet of water. Once we got to our spot, we started rigging up our bait and our rig. And what we had for bait was squid. Once we chopped up some squid, we started rigging up our rig. And what you need for deep dropping is a light and a very big weight. So once we had our light and our weight rigged up, we now start rigging up our squid. All we do with this squid is we're going to chop that squid into 3 small pieces. Then we're just going to rig each of these squids up to our chicken rig, and these chicken rigs come with 5 different hooks, just because when you drop so deep down you don't want to keep bringing it up and down if you lose bait. We now are ready for our first drop 1,000 feet deep, and it takes us a solid 3 to 4 minutes every drop just to hit bottom when you're fishing 1,000 feet deep. And you guys will notice how dark it gets down there, and this is why it's so important to use that light. So we now make our way down to the bottom. This is now drop 1 of 3, and on that last drop you guys won't believe what chased up our fish live right on the camera. And to me, seeing stuff like that makes this whole deep drop process so worth it, so definitely stay tuned for that last drop. And on this day, the current was ripping, so you guys will notice it takes us such a long time just to hit the bottom. So as you guys can see, we are now about 100 feet right off the bottom, and it's pitch black. You really cannot see too much down here, and that's why we added that light in the beginning. It's so important to add that light or you really can't see much. So now when we hit bottom, you guys will see just how much life truly is 1,000 feet deep. So we have just hit bottom on our first drop, and what we are looking for when we hit bottom is green little dots. Every time we see those green little dots just like that, that means it's a fish. And on this first drop, you guys will notice that we were swarmed by fish. You guys will notice after a couple seconds of being on the bottom, we already had a fish hit our bottom bait. So since we got a bite so fast on the bottom, I decided to drop the baits back down to see if we can catch 2 fish at once. Once we hit bottom again, we already had a bunch of fish swarming our baits. After seconds of sitting on the bottom again, a fish hit our middle bait. And as I told you guys in the beginning of this video, when you're dropping baits 1,000 feet deep, there's so much action. So after I had these 2 fish on, I started bringing these fish up. And this is what makes the deep dropping process so long. Every time you have to drop down or bring up baits 1,000 feet deep, or even when you have fish on, it takes a good 5 to 10 minutes just to reel it in and drop it back down, which makes the process just so long. So as we continue to bring these fish up, and as I told you guys in the beginning of this video, what happened to us on drop number 3 is crazy. And when we were bringing the fish up, that's when something chased it, and we were able to catch this all on camera, so stay tuned. Once we landed those 2 black belly rosefish, we were ready to make drop number 2. So we took some fresh pieces of squid, re-rigged our chicken rig, and we made our way back down to the bottom. And if you guys are enjoying this kind of underwater camera content, it would mean a lot if you guys can drop a like on this vid. It took my family and I hours to film this just because of how long the deep dropping process takes, especially when you're 1,000 feet deep. Also, let me know in the comments down below where you guys would want to see me drop this camera next. We now have just hit bottom, and on this second drop, there was just not as much life like that first drop. We saw a good amount of fish around the baits here, but none of these fish ever took the bait. So we waited for about 3 to 4 minutes on the bottom, and then right when we started picking the baits up, a fish jumped on. So I started bringing up this fish, and after bringing him up about 70 feet off the bottom, we saw that this fish was able to just shake his way right off our hook. So on this drop, we came up empty-handed. But on this next drop, the craziest thing happened. This is when this fish chased up the fish we had on our hook, and it's the craziest thing I have seen while deep dropping. We now got our rig back to the boat, so once I reset everything from the baits, we were ready to make our way back down to the bottom, and this is where the craziest thing happened. So we now make our way back down to the bottom, and it took us again 5 to 10 minutes just to hit bottom. And on this day that we were filming this kind of video, the current was so bad, so the boat drifted at a really fast pace, which made us have to release so much line just to find the bottom. Also, when we hit bottom, the current made it even worse because our rig really couldn't just stay on the bottom. I had to keep letting out line just to stay right on the bottom. We now are about 100 feet right off the bottom. And when we hit bottom, you guys will notice again that we were swarmed by fish. But the craziest part of this video happened when we were bringing up the fish we caught. Something giant chased it. We now have just hit bottom and we saw a ton of those green eyes once we hit bottom. And we knew we were in the right spot. So I waited on the bottom for a couple minutes and then something swam up and hit it. As you guys can see on the bottom right, those little green eyes. And then he came up and hit that middle bait and we were hooked into another nice fish. So after we hooked into this nice fish, I waited on the bottom for a little just to see if any of his buddies would jump on. Sadly, none of these other fish jumped on, so we started bringing this fish up. And this is where the craziest part happened. So we were about 100 feet from the boat now, and we looked behind this fish when we looked at this video, and we saw a massive sailfish come up and swim at this black belly rosefish. Sadly, the sailfish didn't attack this Rosie. That would have been so cool. But he took a drive-by right by the camera, which made it so awesome. So after we saw that giant sailfish now, we continued to bring this fish up, and we were able to successfully land this black belly rosefish. We really hope you guys enjoyed this crazy Barjacks video, and we hope to see you guys in the next Barjacks Family Fishing video.